Joining me now from London is Michael Bociurkiw. He is a global affairs analyst and the former spokesperson for the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Really good to see you, Michael. As the tension here continues to ratchet up, we just heard from Jim, right, about a possible intervention on the part of the United States in Ukraine. Putin's reaction again, very predictable. We've been here several times before. What's the risk now, Michael? Because the U.S. is in a tough spot, as always, right? If you respond here, it gives Russia the opportunity to say, we are just reacting to what you are already doing in Ukraine.
Sure. Good to be with you, Paula. Yeah, the U.S. is in a very tough spot, and it's also in a further tough spot because it doesn't have many diplomatic boots on the ground in key capitals like Kiev because of the holding up of ambassadorial appointments. But listen, you know what America and Western allies need to understand about Mr. Putin are basically three things. Number one, he's a very dangerous man. And Jim mentioned the buildup of the Russian troops there on the border, as well as heavy high-tech armory. The other thing is we learned this summer that Mr. Putin still dreams of a reunification of Russia with Ukraine. And then thirdly, Mr. Putin is like a chess player. He's a master at it. And he likes to strike when the West is very vulnerable and distracted. And right now, where I sit, you know, in the UK and Europe, there's a very big distraction with the COVID-19 crisis and also a looming energy crisis that Russia is gradually having control over.
Yeah, certainly a lot at play here. And as you point out, we've gone through several U.S. administrations with Mr. Putin now on this. What has been the reaction inside of Ukraine, given that eastern Ukraine, to remind everyone, has had this simmering conflict for years with separatists there supported by Russian arms and intelligence?
Exactly. I think there is a growing fear in Ukraine, and I've just returned from the region. I was in Riga, and also there, especially with what's happening with the so-called hybrid warfare tactics of Russia, as everyone saw, using the puppet Lukashenko of Belarus to send vulnerable migrants to the EU. But also, Paul, I think what's happening, this isn't often cited, but there's also a changing dynamic on the battlefield in Ukraine's favor. And I think this is really worrying Mr. Putin. And what I mean by that is they're now using very advanced Turkish drones to take out Russian-backed rebels in eastern Ukraine. And there's more on the way. And it's a very interesting geopolitical dynamic because don't forget, Turkey is also a member of NATO, but it also sells aircraft and weapons to Russia. But, you know, I'll just reference 2014 again when MH17 was shot down. Ukraine was getting aerial advantage at that time. What did the rebels do? They called in that Buk missile that shot down MH17. And that's why I'm particularly worried right now that the same playbook may happen.
Yeah, just hearing that from you, Michael, I have to say is incredibly chilling because you see it unfold, and yet there does seem to be this vacuum where diplomacy doesn't seem to be able to do anything. I will note that the Biden administration agrees that they are trying to set up some type of a virtual summit with Mr. Putin in the coming weeks. At this point, though, you have to ask the question, what is Putin's endgame? Because at every turn, and you make such a good point about the fact that the situation in terms of advantage seems to be changing in Ukraine, does he mean there to just probably take off some of the heat from what has been going on, whether it's with Turkey or with NATO allies?
Sure. Well, we're not even sure if Mr. Putin knows what the end game is. But one point of speculation there, of course, is that he would like to establish a land bridge between Russia and Crimea because it's very difficult to service that huge territory. I think the only thing that may deter him from this is a show of unity, strong unity in the West, made more difficult, though, by the departure of Angela Merkel from the mix. She was the only one I think that Putin would really stand up to or listen to. But I think if they can show that any further land grab will be very, very financially painful. And I'm talking about even temporarily removing Russia from the SWIFT payment system, which would paralyze their economy. That's something which would deter them. But the other thing, on the other hand, there's so many other hands with Mr. Putin, is that that Nord Stream 2 pipeline, gas pipeline, is about to enter service, even with a delay in Germany. And that will give him even more leverage over the situation over the Ukraine and over Europe.
Yeah, and I know everyone says that, look, that pipeline really geopolitically will develop into a very serious situation for Europe going forward. Michael, I'm so glad to get your analysis on this. Appreciate you being here with us.
My pleasure.